I've got, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 comments on the video for cutting threads on how to make the nut. It wasn't really that long ago. I'm thinking maybe, 3 months, maybe 2 months, that I made a nut for wooden threads. And it's kind of a little bit annoying when guys, ask these questions without actually doing a little bit of looking and seeing that yes, I had already made a nut for wooden threads. But with that said, I want to go over a couple of different ways to do that in this video. I've got a really simple, easy way to make them that I guess some people will call it cheating, but the end result is what's important. My first attempt to make a nut in a way differently from the way I showed in the previous video was to make it by taking individual pieces, soaking them in water, and then bending them to conform to the threading on the threaded rod so that it threads on. I'm saying threads a bit too much, so anyway, you can see how that works. That was a little bit tricky, and it's not really the best way of doing it, I don't think. It took a long time to get everything lined up, and then I had to clamp it and let it set until the wood dried out again, and then glue it together. So it was kind of an ordeal, not the best way. But it does work, so as you can see. Another way to cut it, and that's the way I'm going to show now very quickly, is to cut them by hand from two pieces of wood like this. That would go together, and then I would drill a hole and cut the threads by hand with a small chisel and a sharp knife. It's not the prettiest one, but it works, and that's the main thing. And it actually didn't take that long. I mean, despite the fact that I screwed up in the beginning there and made a nut complete that was actually threaded the wrong way. But then that could be used for a right-hand thread. This is actually a left-hand thread, but it works well. I start with 2 blocks of wood that I'm going to drill 1-inch hole into about halfway. Now I've changed a bit to 3/4, I'm going to drill the rest of the way through. And what that does is it has a step down inside there so that it'll fit tightly around the threads and hold it in place while I put the filler in the other part here, and that'll make up the threads. So the first thing I got to do is make sure that the filler doesn't stick to this rod afterwards. So I'm going to take a little bit of mineral oil and pour it on the threads and work that into the wood a little bit. Okay, so I got my threads lubricated. I'm going to take some filler and mix up. I don't need a lot. I think, well, half of that will probably do. I get my hardener here. Squeeze out a little bit and mix that up. Now once you have this mix, you have to work quickly because it sets up fairly quickly. So I'm just going to take it, and I'm not going to put any in here, although it really doesn't matter if I do, and get it into this and make sure that it's fully in there. Overfill it. Do the same on the other side. Now I haven't tried this. I know it's going to work, but I haven't actually tried to do it yet. So I take the threads, make sure I've got the part that's been oiled, and push that in. Then I can take the other side, put that on, and now I'm going to clamp that up. Now all I'm going to do is let that harden, and then it will be ready. Okay, it looks like the filler is hardened up enough that I can take it out of the clamps, and I can try to unscrew it. It's a little hard to turn, but it is turning, so it's a little tight. Oh, I got a problem here. I think I might have been a little hasty, jumped the gun. I should have left it to cure a little bit longer maybe, but it's just one little piece of thread. We'll see how extensive the damage is. Looking inside, it looks pretty good. Actually, there aren't any threads missing. So that must have been behind. It was back here where the block is narrower. So I'm just going to take it apart, and you can see that the thread is perfectly formed. I'm just going to take this now, sand these sides flush. I'm not going to do much sanding because it'll affect the fit, and then I'm going to re-glue these together. And I'm just going to thread this in, see how it looks. You can see how nice and well formed the thread is, and it really didn't take much effort at all to do this. So I'm just going to leave that in there. I'm going to put the mating side on also, and I'm going to get some glue on here to glue the nut together. Now while the glue is drying on this, I want to talk about something else. I got an email asking how tough the threads are, and I've got to say that these threads are fairly fragile, so you have to be really careful. I gave it some thought, and I came up with a way to easily, well, relatively easily, reinforce these threads to make them very tough. And that is to cut these, they look like lock washers actually. What they are pieces of wood that I cut from a cylinder, and I cut them to the same thickness so that they'll fit inside the thread. And what you could do, although it is a little bit labor intensive, is to take each one of these, split them with a knife, just split them, and then carefully bend it a little bit so it actually threads on. As you can see, the ring is just split and fit on there, and then you carefully thread it on. What you'd want to do is actually glue this in place by putting some glue in the threads, then turning this on. Then you could take another one and do exactly the same thing right behind it. Carefully bend it in place and thread it on. Once these are glued in, they'll really make for a very strong thread. That's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it informative. There are, as I've shown, a couple of different ways to make nuts, but I do believe that the best way is the way with the body filler. It's the quickest. It will be a custom nut to fit on your custom threaded rod. Also, the way to reinforce the threading, although it may take some time to do, I think in the long run it would be really worth it, because you wind up with a superior threading that will last a long time and won't be as fragile as the regular threading will be. Well, tomorrow I have another video, and that's on building my table saw taper jig. I made this taper jig about 2 years ago, but I didn't do a build video on it. It's like a few of my older projects that I want to revisit and do build videos on. I've also updated the plans, and those will be talked about tomorrow also. Well, anyway, well, maybe I'll start again. That's what I'll do. I'll start again. I've got nothing but time. This one, I hope you enjoyed my nuts.